Welcome, everybody. This is Mary Vandenplas, Director of Operations and Research here at Burtch Works. Burtch Works is an executive recruiting firm that specializes in filling data science and analytics roles. And today, three of our quantitative recruiters will be answering your questions on career planning, job searching, and hiring market trends. And now to introduce our speakers for today. Flora Zhang is well versed in the analytics space, having been a quantitative market researcher at Nielsen for several years. She also spent 3 years doing competitive analysis, tracking studies, and qualitative interviews as a marketing consultant. Flora now shares her deep knowledge of the quantitative talent landscape in blogs, webinars, and speaking to analytics students at universities. Carla Ahern began her career in marketing research before moving into recruiting, serving as a project manager for IRI, working on-site at PepsiCo, and then focusing on custom research within media, CPG, and pharmaceuticals at Knowledge Networks, now owned by GfK Ipsos. Carla now works with data scientists and analytics professionals and shares her career management advice in blogs and webinars. Brian Shepard spent several years in social science research at NORC at the University of Chicago and worked on studies for a variety of government agencies. Brian often contributes his insights to the Burtch Works blog and shares insights for employers on the intricacies of hiring data scientists. For those of you who aren't familiar with Burtch Works, we're an executive recruiting firm specializing in quantitative fields like analytics, data science, and marketing research. Over the past several years, our managing director, Linda Burtch, and Burtch Works have been repeatedly mentioned in the press, including The Economist, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and the Chicago Tribune, among many others. Burtch Works has also been repeatedly recognized by Forbes as one of America's best recruiting firms. Now, today we'll be covering a variety of topics related to the job process, including resume tips and best practices, job search tips, managing the hiring process as a candidate, and working with recruiters, breaking into analytics and data science, career management and insights, analytics and hiring market trends. And don't forget, we'll also have a live Q&A at the end. And now on to that first topic, resume tips and best practices. Our first question is, what is the best way to position yourself as an applicant who is relocating or applying for jobs in a new area? Carla, I think you wanted to start off with this one.
Sure, yeah, happy to kick us off. So this is a question that we probably get on a weekly, if not daily basis. But I think the thing that we would recommend is really first and foremost to be honest on LinkedIn and on your resume for where you're currently located. And then again, on LinkedIn and on your resume, you can include a short blurb about where you'd like to relocate, when, why, and again, it can just be at the top. For instance, currently located in Phoenix, interested in relocating to the Denver area in spring of 2020 or something like that. I think from our perspective, we want to just try to get the full picture, and if you're relocating for perhaps a spouse or a partner's job, you could even include that just so there's a little bit more of a defined timeline around your move. If perhaps, you don't have a specific location in mind and, you're just open and you want to change, put that on LinkedIn, put that on your resume as well. And again, it can literally be under your name and your current location, like open to relocating for new opportunities. Again, I think it's just equipping the internal recruiter, the third-party recruiter with as much information as possible and giving them a clear lens with which to view your resume and your application and your candidacy for specific roles. Just giving as much information as possible.
All right. Thank you very much, Carla. Our second question is, what are the keys to an effective resume for data science and analytics, especially when you are switching careers? Flora, I know you've written a lot of our blogs about resumes, so I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, definitely. And I would always refer you, of course, to some of these resources that we have online, including these blogs. But, to help answer the question, I would look at these from a lens of, for better or for worse, resumes and hiring managers. There's constantly a massive load of applications that are being submitted online. So it's very important to be able to highlight what is important and make sure your strong points and your skill sets are coming through. First and foremost, unless you have just 10 plus years of experience, I really try and recommend no more than 1 or maximum 2 pages. Again, as I mentioned, resume reviewers just don't have time to look at every single detail on your resume. Oftentimes it's just a quick, 10-second perusal. So make sure the most important information is highlighted and really close to the top of your resume. If you're switching careers, you haven't really worked professionally in analytics, and maybe your professional work hasn't reflected what you're looking to move into, add in that section. Sometimes, I call it like relevant side projects, maybe academic work, boot camp experience. Make sure this is highlighted and speaks to, the direction in which you're looking to go.
All right, great. Thank you very much. And our next question is, I've been applying to lots of data science jobs, but haven't gotten any calls back yet. Do you have any recommendations? Brian, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. This is going to piggyback a little bit off of what Flora was talking about, but I think it's important to remember hiring teams are really inundated with resumes, especially when looking for a data scientist. It's a very hot career, so they're getting hundreds of resumes. They're very busy just kind of sorting through the resumes. So one thing to keep in mind is a lot of the screeners on the hiring side don't always necessarily thoroughly understand the role. They might be looking for key skills. So highlight those things really clearly in your resume when applying for roles. It's really important to review that job description and make sure your resume is really targeted to the specific role that you're applying to. And simple things like aesthetics do matter. So I always say, it's important to kind of leave out text blocks, keep it kind of straightforward when it comes to the resume. Your background information right at the top, your education, your work history, include those things. And like Flora said, keep it to 1 or 2 pages. And just a plug for Burtch Works. Given that these hiring teams are so busy, it's one of the great perks of working with us is that we've got a direct line to the hiring team, so we can kind of cut through that black box of online applications and make sure your resumes are getting into the right hands of the right people.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. And that, I think, is going to bring us to our next topic of job search tips when looking for a new role. Do you think recruiters are capable of helping hiring organizations better understand their data science needs? I think, Brian, actually, you wanted to take this one as well.
Yeah. So obviously, I think, yes, we can. It's really all we do all day, every day, is working with these hiring teams at a variety of organizations. Anywhere from, we've worked with startups as small as they've got 2 people on the payroll and they're looking to dive into data science, to these large multinational organizations that are just adding to their data science team. So we really have a thorough understanding of, regardless of where you are in that data science life cycle, we provide a lot of insight, given that it's, like I said, it's all we do all day, every day. We ask the right questions, we speak with the right people, so we're really able to provide those additional insights that are really important.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Our next question is, how do you view data science bootcamp graduates in the recruitment process? I know this is something that we talk about quite a lot here. Flora, why don't you take this one?
Sure. So, as a recruiter here that works with a lot of entry level or more junior candidates, boot camps are something that I see pretty frequently. And I would say even more and more often as boot camps have popped up, I think, more frequently just in recent years. The answer to this is, unfortunately, that it just depends. I would say that boot camps are not all created equal. Some are great, some I think are still in emerging stages. I don't necessarily think that they will quite replace the value of a master's degree in, say, statistics or analytics or data science or professional work. However, that being said, I think boot camps are a great way to give professionals that extra edge, especially when they already come from pretty quantitative backgrounds. Sometimes just moving from more of your traditional analyst role into that of a true blue data scientist, acquiring that extra statistical modeling experience. So, sometimes this is just that extra little edge they need, or something to, add to the resume, incorporate those projects, as I mentioned before, just to be able to pivot into more of that data science, advanced analytics role.
All right, great. And our next question, I know, is something that a lot of people think about, and I think is especially important in the job search, which is how can I make sure that the companies I'm applying to will be a good fit for what I'm looking for, such as companies that will help me develop my analytics career?
Mary, I'm happy to take that one. This is Carla. That's a very good question. And just kind of overall fit and longevity is a really good thing to think about, and making sure that it's a good match and a good sort of marriage, from both sides. So a couple of things to think about when evaluating a new role and kind of thinking about developing your career longer term. I think first of all, titles are just never apples to apples from company to company. So when you're in the interview process, be sure first and foremost, really, to ask a lot of questions. Learn about the role, learn about the responsibilities, learn about the structure of the team, learn about, perhaps the career path, if it's defined or not, thinking about who the role reports into, budget, resources. These are all really good questions to ask that are going to give you some context clues as to, perhaps will the support be there for you if you're more junior in your career, if you're more senior, will you have the budget and basically the staff to help you get done what you need to get done. Other things perhaps to ask too during the interview process, just thinking about longer term learning opportunities. Are there any available? If you want to do a boot camp in conjunction, will there be the opportunity to do that? Maybe will they help pay for it? Questions to ask there. And then just overall, as you think about planning out your next steps within your analytics career, other things really just to think about and evaluate and really, kind of think about for yourself personally are, the company size, the team size. Are they in startup mode? Are they large and established organizations with established analytics teams? Those are all going to offer different experiences. So think about where you are in your career and where you'd like to go. What's a good fit for you personally? Do you want to continue in the same industry? Are you in retail? Do you want to continue along the retail track, or do you want to try something new? Looking at management opportunities. Is that something that you're looking for in your next role? Or are you content and do you really enjoy being an individual contributor? So these are all questions to ask during the interview process that are really going to give you clues as to whether it's going to be a good fit on both sides and whether it's going to continue to develop your career and move you forward.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Carla. And our next question is how do you determine what your starting salary should be when you're asked? And how do you address that expected salary question? And I know, Carla, you wanted to jump in on this one as well.
Yes, a favorite topic here at Burtch Works, really talking about salary expectations. And, you want to be prepared for this question too. You don't want to freeze up. You don't want to be caught on the spot and not know what to say. And we've heard a lot of people, talk to a lot of people who have said, I wasn't ready for that question. I wish I had thought about it beforehand. So again, to plug Burtch Works, our salary studies are really a great place to start. So do some research, really sit down, look at very reputable sources for this information, look and understand your title and sort of your roles and responsibilities, kind of where you are and where you want to go. And it's really, it's a fine line, but try not to price yourself out. And, obviously don't sell yourself short. So I'm saying that all in the same breath, but really what that means is if you're asked to give a salary expectation, what you're shooting for, we really always advise giving a range, and it can be a larger range. But if you give a range, you're probably not going to price yourself out, and you're probably not going to sell yourself short. So if you give a big range, you're not drawing a line in the sand, you're showing you're a little bit flexible, and that generally bodes really well, both with the recruiter and, when you're working with the company directly themselves. Another thing just to think about, and we talk a lot to people who are interested in moving to the Bay Area or New York. One thing just to think about is the cost of living is quite high in some of these areas where a lot of people want to be in their hubs for analytics and data science. But it is important to understand that while the cost of living is much higher, often salaries don't necessarily keep pace exactly with that higher cost of living. A lot of people want to live there, and it's often for reasons other than just the job. So you might not, if you're thinking about moving from I don't know, Chicago to the Bay Area and you're looking at cost of rent or something, it might be 100% higher, but you're probably not going to be getting 100% more in your salary. So just thinking about that and being realistic too when thinking about cost of living.
All right, those are some excellent points, Carla. Thank you. And so now we're going to move on to our next topic, which is the hiring process and working with recruiters. So I know we obviously, as a recruiting firm, really encourage people to work with us and think it's of high value. So I'll start off the discussion by kind of opening it up. And what do you think is the highest value that we provide to candidates?
Yeah, so we like to think that we're, a great asset in this process. And, even speaking personally, I remember before I worked in recruiting, I didn't actually know that this was even a service or, a type of offering that could be given to me as a candidate. And so most importantly, as I mentioned before, just resumes often get lost into a pile of resumes. It's very hard to distinguish yourself. And so what we provide to you as a candidate is, really a direct line of communication with stakeholders, hiring managers, HR folks who are looking to hire. We've 100% of the time pretty much had conversations with them directly, have an understanding of what they're looking for, and as a result, I think are able to put the most appropriate profile in front of the hiring team, and ensuring that you're able to get that interview.
Yeah, like Flora said, I think it's really just kind of cutting through the clutter and avoiding that black box portal, that's online. You don't know if it's checked. You are really not sure if it gets into the hands of the right person. And then little things, just to add to what Flora said, little things. I was just having a discussion with a colleague yesterday, and she visited a client, and looks like we're going to be bringing them on as a new client, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But she said when she got there, she noticed there was no waiting area. She's like, okay, well, if we start working with, this company on this role, that's a tip I'm going to give the professionals that I'm working with, like, hey, don't get there 15 minutes in advance. There's no waiting area. That sounds like a little bit of a silly example, but it's all of those little tips and tricks that we're able, again, to provide, and little pieces of advice and little tidbits of, hey, make sure to wear a suit. Hey, reminder, did you send thank you emails? So I think it's just sort of like that full candidate experience on both ends, and really making sure that everything is buttoned up, everything's confirmed, and trying to just make it as smooth a process as possible, both from the client's end as well as from the professional who is interviewing's end.
All right, thank you very much, guys. And let's also talk a bit more about the hiring process and what candidates can do to kind of make themselves a stronger candidate. So during the process, how do I share skill building examples, knowledge, et cetera, under the constraint of an NDA? Carla, I think you had some advice on this.
Yeah, and we're we're certainly not lawyers, so I don't want to give too much advice when it comes to disclosure agreements. That's not necessarily our bread and butter. But I think I still think that there's a way that you're able to communicate your skills without giving information out. So you can still, if you could still maybe talk on your resume or in an interview about, a major Fortune 100 CPG company, and then talk about sort of the work that you did and the insights that you brought to the table without giving anything away that would violate an NDA or something like that. So I think there's definitely ways to get around it, ways to do it, but you don't need to throw all your cards on the table, so to speak, if that makes sense.
All right, and I know Brian wanted to talk about ways that you can translate soft skills like communication in an interview.
I think it's important just in the interview process, thanks, Mary, to just really highlight the topics that are going to be important to the organization. So doing your research about the organization and really understanding what their mission is and what they're looking for is going to be really important. And we know too, like interviewing is stressful for everybody. It's stressful for the interviewer, it's stressful for the candidate being interviewed. So sometimes that can lead to long-winded questions. So it's important to kind of stick to topic and really focus on the question that's being asked and keep your answers clear and concise. Stick to the point and try not to veer too far off of topic.
And just to add to that too, I mean, another skill set that we find very valuable is those who, yes, have a very technical background, but also who can translate and explain things to non-quantitative audiences. That's an ask that we hear from our clients time after time. How are they able to communicate things in layman's terms? Like, they need to work with, for instance, our sales team, and these gals and guys don't have quantitative backgrounds. Can this person clearly communicate what this very complex technical model is saying, and how can these salespeople take that to the field and do better with it? So that's something to think about as well. And we always say, before an interview and before you, get on a phone screen, try to talk things aloud. And it really helps to just kind of practice, get it out there, get any of the, kind of bumps along the way out, and quite frankly, just say it out loud and try to get it out there. Try to get your story, try to get your anecdote before you go into an interview.
All right, that's some great advice. And this question kind of brings us into our next topic, which is breaking into the analytics and data science fields. How to articulate my new skill sets, and what milestones in a grad program, like what point in a grad program is it a good time to begin looking for new opportunities? Flora, since you're our early career expert, I'll let you take this one.
Sure. So, I think always is a good time to at least be on the lookout, for opportunities, see what kinds of jobs you're most interested in applying to. It definitely varies depending on kind of the process that you're in the middle of. For example, if you're in school, make sure you keep an eye out for internships, as those can often lead to full-time opportunities as well. Network amongst alums. If there are any on-campus recruiting initiatives, that may take place a full year before your actual graduation. Of course, what I spend all my days doing is, on the recruiting side. And so for us as a contingency recruiting firm, we recommend starting the conversation with us about 1 to 2 months in advance of when you're actually able to start working full time. We can start the conversation. Our clients are looking to hire as soon as possible, and we can really get the ball rolling that way.
I know you wanted to talk about communicating past work experience that does not directly apply to the new career path.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this one's pretty straightforward. We certainly appreciate trying to, make connections and draw parallels with your past work experience. However, we will say, don't dedicate too much space on your resume or your LinkedIn profile to positions that aren't necessarily related to what you're looking to do. So people can kind of see through if you're trying to make too much of a bridge and too much of a connection. So try to keep that short. When you're talking to a recruiter like us, or you're on an interview, also try to keep your spiel concise. Again, if your past work experience is related, but perhaps not directly related, just try to keep it short, try to keep it concise, and instead talk about what you're doing, what steps you're taking in order to get that next role. Again, to Flora's point earlier, are you enrolled in boot camps? Are you in any master's programs, any MOOCs? What are you doing to try to get that next role? And I think that's really going to have an impact too, rather than trying to paint your past experience if it's not directly related, trying to stretch it too far, too thin.
All right, great. And our next question is, what is the best advice that you've given to someone looking to break into the field of analytics and data science, or transitioning from academic work, maybe? Flora, do you want to take this one on?
Yeah, sure. Analytics, data science, is certainly a hot field, growing and really thriving, flourishing. So, I've seen candidates from really every background imaginable looking to break in. And, some have been successful, others have been maybe less successful. So it really is important to be both ambitious but also realistic about the switch. can you leverage your existing skill set, some of your business acumen to, advance yourself beyond, say, a typical entry-level candidate? If so, that's wonderful. And if not, though, it is important to be able to prepare yourself for, just a potentially more junior level title or salary as well, just with the understanding that you might have to repave your career path, for lack of a better phrase. And I've also hammered this in a few times today, but just to ensure that everything you're submitting, whether it's, your resume, your cover letter, your application, that they really reflect your desire to pivot into this space. Bring out the skill set that you want to use, not your, past life, and then highlight that relevant work experience, project experience, and make that really the focus of your resume, again, just to, bring that point home.
All right, thank you very much. And now on to our next topic, which is career management. So a little, more not just job searching, but how do you manage your career as a whole? And our first question is, it feels like the statistical software options are expanding every day. How do we stay current? What programming language are employers looking for, and where can I learn it if I already have the degree in hand? Brian, I know you've talked about this one a lot.
Yeah. So another great thing that Burtch Works does is we really stay in touch with the community to get a feel for what programs are in demand. We do our SAS, R, or Python survey every year, and we really appreciate everyone's participation in that. So a little plug for that. But generally, what we're seeing is Python is definitely not taking over, but it's definitely the program of choice for most of our clients. And when we see folks looking for data science opportunities, Python is going to be extremely important. There are organizations that still, are exclusively R, maybe some in the financial space, you're seeing more SAS. But if you're looking to get into some of these traditional data science roles, Python is definitely the way to go. When it comes to learning about them and really honing your skills, I think because data science is such a hot topic and a lot of organizations are really putting a lot of focus on their advanced analytics, a lot of organizations, even internally to their current employees, will offer like brown bags or lunch and learns. So when that's offered with your current employer, always a good opportunity. It's a free way and good opportunity to kind of hone those skills. Other things that you can do on your own, there's like online resources, Data Camp, Coursera, Udacity. These are all online programs that can really focus on specific programs that you're looking to develop your skills in. And another one too, if you have the money and the time, boot camps are always a great way to go. I know we've worked quite a bit with Metis in the past, and we've done some blogs with them just about the growth of Python in the data science space. So those are some options that you could look into.
All right, great. Thanks for that. And here's another topic actually that comes up quite a bit in the questions that we get, which is about job hopping or staying in for the longer term. How do you advise people to kind of manage the length of stay at their jobs? Flora, why don't you take
Yeah. So, first and foremost, the answer definitely isn't job hopping, which I think already has just a little bit of a negative connotation to me. And that definition, of course, does vary. But to me, that's maybe anywhere from working, a few weeks or months to potentially less than a year and doing that repeatedly. Multiple offenses of job hopping always raise a red flag, both to recruiters as well as hiring managers. So that's certainly not the way to go. However, on the flip side, working for too long in a certain role or industry might hinder you from seeking new opportunities if employers feel, you've maybe become a little bit siloed in your skill set or expertise. But, if you're really happy with your job and you continue to grow, I've seen folks have, an amazing 20 years of a career at one single firm. So, my best answer, just to kind of sum all this up, would be ideally to fall somewhere in between, maybe anywhere from a healthy 2 to 5 years or so, evaluate where you're at, and then maybe consider making a switch once you've gained that experience, you've learned enough to leverage at your next employer. I will kind of add on that switching employers does tend to be the faster way to make salary gains, and so make of that what you will.
All right. And then our last question on this topic is about those kind of mid-career shifts, whether it's industry or pursuing leadership roles, and what's the best way to go about that? Carla, why don't you take this one?
So it's around pursuing leadership. I'm sorry, Mary, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, sorry. It's if you're switching industries or want to switch into a leadership role, what's some advice you have around that?
Got it. I'm so sorry. I did not hear the first part. Yeah, so I think, a lot of this is really being mindful of how you do it. And I think, sort of from our perspective, what we've seen is that first and foremost, all teams, all hiring managers are going to have different preferences. So find out as much kind of as you can if you're interested in going to a specific company or if you're interested in a specific role. Generally speaking, we have found that it's a little bit easier to go from industry to industry if it's the same type of role. For instance, if you're in marketing analytics and you work at a bank, it's probably going to be quite a bit easier to move into a marketing analytics role at, say, an airline or a retailer. However, it might be a little bit harder if the roles aren't directly comparable. For instance, if you're in a risk role at a bank, it might be a little bit more difficult to move into, a marketing analytics role at a retailer or at an airline. So kind of if the title and the focus of the role is the same, it's probably going to be quite a bit easier to change industry versus kind of taking on a new role completely, if that makes sense. And then I think from a leadership perspective, I mean, it's probably not going to be the super popular answer, but I think it's putting your time in. I think it's putting your time in, getting that experience under your belt. When you can, showing mentorship abilities if you don't have direct reports, trying to seek them out, that mentoring, just kind of coaching of more junior employees, get that under your belt if you can. And again, we always stress, regardless of your seniority, try to stay hands-on. No matter how senior you are, try to be hands-on. And, again, if you're in a leadership type of role, try to split it up. So part of your time will go towards management of more junior employees, but again, try to be hands-on with the modeling, try to be hands-on with the data. You never want to lose that skill. You never want those skills to get dull.
All right, excellent. And that brings us to our last topic here. And I'm going to open this up to everybody. So what skills are most desirable in the data and analytics market right now? And are clearly defined career tracks starting to emerge now that more data scientists are accruing experience?
Okay, so I'll start that one, Mary. Because I sort of sound like a broken record at this point, but data science is such a new sort of baby when it comes to the industry that they're not necessarily there yet in terms of the clear career path and data scientist leads to senior data scientist leads to lead. You're not always seeing that with organizations. Organizations are learning as they go, and it's important to have that flexibility as a candidate that not necessarily get hung up on title, just because title can mean so much from one organization to the next. In terms of skills that are most desirable in data analytics right now, we find that our most successful candidates and our most successful clients as well, staying hands-on, this kind of goes back to what Carla was just saying, staying hands-on in the analytics is going to be extremely important. Again, the industry is changing so much that if you're hands off the keyboard for a couple of months, you can quickly kind of fall out of step with where trends are going and just staying up to date in the market. And in terms of new things that we're sort of seeing as data science is maturing, one of the things that we've seen some of our clients moving into is data as a product. So when they have a strong data science team in place, sort of thinking next level about where can they go with that strong data science team and developing new tools and products that can be used within and outside of organizations, making use of those more advanced analytic tools that they've established. So that's just one thing I'm sort of seeing in the field.
And then on the softer side of things as well. One thing that really differentiates, say, analytics from just a straight programmer or computer IT person skill set is really the ability to be strategic about the work that you're doing. And so every model that you build, every program that you run should have a business purpose, and it's important to keep that in mind while you're doing this, as well as being able to communicate the findings to stakeholders, across all stakeholders, as Carla mentioned earlier, technical audiences, less technical audiences, CEOs, just the interns. So keeping that in mind, that's really what I think differentiates when all else being equal on paper, a candidate can really shine through.
All right. Well, thank you guys. And just in just a minute, we're going to get started on that live Q&A, but I have a couple of quick items to go through before then. But if you have any additional questions, please keep sending those in. We'll get to as many as we can during the Q&A. If you're interested in our salary data that Flora, Carla, and Brian have been talking about for data science and analytics professionals, our full report breaks down the salaries by quartiles, means, and medians, and examines salaries for demographic factors like industry, gender, region, and much more. It's free to download at burtchworks.com/study. And if you're looking to browse for new opportunities, you can check out our targeted job board, which is trafficked by thousands of quantitative professionals in a variety of fields. And for more hiring market insights, check out our blog, burtchworks.com/blog, where you can find flash survey results, information on analytics tools, salaries, and other important information. And you can also follow Burtchworks across our social media channels to stay up to date on our latest research. And finally, at youtube.com/Burtchworks, you can find recordings of our other presentations, including our 2020 Data Science and Analytics Trends and Predictions, our SAS/R Python Flash Survey Analysis, and our Salary Report Recap, plus more. And now on to that live Q&A. I know that we've gotten some really good questions in, and we're going to start off with a question about when is a good time to, so about a salary, or sorry, about visas, which is something I know that we get a lot. And what is a good time to bring up your visa status when you are applying for roles?
A lot of times we see that just part of the application process that will be asked. So I think being really upfront with the potential employer right from the get-go is going to be important. Just with the current climate being what it is, although employers would love to be able to work with candidates on visas, that's not always going to be a possibility. So just being really upfront, and so as a candidate too, just you don't want to waste your time going after a role that is not going to be a possibility. So right from the beginning, it's going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a question on how to format a resume if you have a kind of an experience gap or maybe a non-relevant role that you would otherwise leave off. How do you express that on your resume without looking like you have an employment gap?
Hey Mary, this is Carla. I can take that one. I think again, to piggyback off what Brian was saying, I think it's just being transparent. If you took a year off to travel the world, you took a sabbatical, you stayed at home with your kids, for the first several years of their lives, that's, put that on there. You can create a bullet that, simply says, traveled the world, visited 17 countries, utilized my new, Spanish language speaking skills, whatever it is. You don't make it 7 bullets. Don't have it take up a ton of space and real estate on your resume, but put it on there. What I think, raises more red flags than not is when people do have those gaps. If you put on what you were doing, that basically it answers the question for the person reading your resume, and it doesn't feel like the elephant in the room where they need to bring it up. I think it almost looks like if you don't have a time period accounted for on your resume, it looks like you're trying to hide something. So just put it on there, don't make it the main focus of your resume, but just put it on there so that chronologically, when someone's viewing your resume, it looks very cohesive and they understand the story of what you've been doing the last several years or months.
All right, very helpful. And then a couple of you talked a bit about networking. Do you have any networking tips that you'd like to share?
Do it. Networking is, it's just never a bad idea, whether it's for, professional purposes, social purposes. Luckily within the field of analytics and data science, there are many sort of outlets available. Off the bat, I can think of just the ASA, statistical associations. We have groups among schools, a lot of organizations now that are dedicated specifically to kind of analytics and furthering knowledge, sharing knowledge in that space. Check online. There's always things available. Oftentimes too, and I feel like I keep, harping on this, but when just submitting a resume is not enough, distinguish yourself with your personality, and that can be accomplished through, maybe meeting that next manager at one of these meetings or, at a convention, and, definitely do it. It really can only help. Really very rarely does harm. So.
Great. And then we've got a question about expressing, your job title on your resume, especially if you feel like your current official job title is not an accurate reflection of what your actual job duties are. How do you advise people to kind of walk that line on their resume of their job title versus what they actually do?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. I think the first thing is just make sure whatever you end up going with, have it match your resume versus LinkedIn. Sometimes people compare the two, so you don't want to have it say senior analyst on your resume and then manager on LinkedIn, for instance. So just make sure first and foremost that everything matches. And I think the second thing to think about, and we've touched on this earlier, is that again, titles are not apples to apples comparisons from one company to the next. Some industries and some companies will tend to inflate the title a little bit, and others, maybe it's a startup that very purposefully has created a very flat hierarchy, and perhaps there's just analyst, director, and VP. So sometimes people will still list their exact title as it is at their company, but then in parentheses say AVP, or kind of put in parentheses what it might be equivalent to in the market or in the industry. For instance, we have seen over the years that banking tends to kind of go towards the VP, AVP title, SVP title a little bit sooner than many other industries. So sometimes people will put, AVP on their resume and then in parentheses, senior manager or something. Just again, Flora, Brian, and I, and everyone here at Burtch Works could take a look at a resume and kind of get a sense for your level of seniority. But if you're applying directly to a company and perhaps the person is not an expert in data science and analytics recruiting, they might need a little bit more help, a little bit more sort of context clues with which to view what your title is and what your roles and responsibilities are. And again, title is only half of the game. I think it's also just making sure that your resume and your LinkedIn profile really tell the full story. So give some detail, give some example, and all of those extra points and details that you're making on your resume are just really going to give the reader a full picture of what you're doing. So it's not only title, but use those bullets to really kind of talk yourself up and talk about all of the work you've done to really give the full picture of your role.
All right, excellent. And then another question on basically brushing up on your skills. Have you seen employers out there that are kind of willing to provide training in Python or other new skills that, if you're coming out of a different skill set? Are there employers out there that are, putting together programs like that?
I have to say I haven't seen a lot of that when it comes to applicants like looking for like to get into a role. But when you're with your current employer, a lot of companies, like I mentioned earlier, are offering a lot of these like lunch and learns or brown bags where, it could be today's topic is like code writing in Python. Just so there's a lot of options from organizations, especially who are competitive in the data science space, understand that it's not always easy to keep data scientists around. So one of the things that's going to be crucial is helping them build their skills and offer them new opportunities. So we are seeing that quite a bit with existing employers, yes.
All right, great. I know we also last year did a flash survey where we asked companies about, their data literacy programs. And the results were kind of interesting. So I suggested people to kind of go on our blog and take a look at that as well. So that's the time we have for questions today, but thank you everybody for coming, and thank you especially to Carla, Brian, and Flora for helping out and answering all these questions. And if you'd like to see if we have roles that are a fit for your experience, you can always reach out to us and send your resume to info@burtchworks.com and get the process started. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.